It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be bringing you a review of Tell the Wind and Fire by Rees Brennan. I was lucky enough to receive a digital arc of this novel from the publisher on NetGalley, and that is how I'm able to bring you this review. Rees Brennan, I think, is most well known here on BookTube and to most other people for her Lynburn Legacy novels, which I admit I have not read. I do realize it is a paranormal romance trilogy of sorts, which is probably why I haven't read it. That's not quite my genre. I was, however, familiar with her in terms of short format through her work in writing part of the Bane Chronicles, which also features writing by Cassandra Clare and Maureen Johnson based upon the character of Magnus Bane, who was created by Cassandra Clare and who is probably my favorite character in the Shadowhunter Chronicles. Tell the Wind and Fire is Miss Brennan's most recent release, and I was attracted to this as an arc because I read it was doing a twist upon the novel A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, I think, seems to be a love him or hate him kind of author for a lot of people who attempt him. From what I've gathered, a lot of people read Charles Dickens in school, and I will admit Dickens is not the easiest person to read. His shortest novel, do you consider it a novel? It's, you know, A Christmas Carol. Is that considered a novella? I don't even know what we consider it. I happen to quite like Dickens, though I will admit when I first read him when I was far too young to be reading him, I didn't like him. I found him overly wordy. And there's the joke, which I don't even think is a joke, that he was paid by the word and he made use of it. But whatever the case, when I did encounter Dickens again when I was older, I found that I actually really quite enjoyed his novels. And I will say I really enjoy listening to them more than physically trying to read them a lot of the times. So again, Dickens is kind of hard to swallow for a lot of people, I think, but I happen to quite like his work, and I do particularly love A Tale of Two Cities. With its themes of resurrection, light versus dark, and social justice, it's hard for a reader to not be kind of swept away in the romanticism of its tragedy. And the fact that somebody was trying to do a YA adaptation of it, but then I heard was also throwing in some magic, definitely piqued my interest. On the whole, I think Miss Brennan did a really good job, but at the same time, she still kind of falls a little short. When I realized I had to give a star rating to this book, I rated it a 3.75 out of 5. If you look on Goodreads, I did round it up to a 4 because I have more positive feelings towards this book than negative. The strongest parts of Tell the Wind and Fire are when it actually focuses upon its setting. Basically, when it really digs its claws into its source material and then starts spinning its own web from it. Because it knows it has a really good core story to start with, and it then realizes it can play and do some really neat things. Sure, it's a little clunky at times. A Tale of Two Cities takes place during the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, while Tell the Wind and Fire is taking place in a kind of future New York City. But because it was New York City, I found it a little strange that the revolutionaries were called des Sans Merci, which, while I didn't take French, I think means without thanks. And unfortunately, that was really the only use of French that popped up, so I didn't quite understand why it was there. Now, if this had been set in a futuristic Paris, calling the revolutionaries the Sans Merci would have made a lot of sense in my head, but because we're in New York City, why is it there? This may sound like a silly thing to harp on, but because they're mentioned quite often, and especially by the back third of the book become quite important, it would jar me every time I read it. Despite little details like that and some other just general clunkiness, I still found the setting really intriguing. And what was really great was that because of the tense atmosphere that is set, not only from utilizing the source material, which, as I said, is based upon in the French Revolution and the Bloody Reign of Terror, and therefore tension be everywhere. And Miss Brennan makes great use of that. Throughout her novel, she's progressively pitching up the tension so that we end up seeing a world that is not only on edge, but then we watch it fall apart entirely into just mob-fueled chaos, which, for those of us who think of the French Revolution, I think most of us are just thinking of the Bloody Reign of Terror and the complete chaos that came from that and just the guillotine swinging right and left. Because Miss Brennan writes this tension so well, by the time the finale of Tell the Wind and Fire was coming up, it really did manage to grip me. I'll admit it didn't grip me as much as when I first read A Tale of Two Cities and started really enjoying A Tale of Two Cities, but I think it's a testament to Miss Brennan's commitment to the original Dickens narrative that made her retelling so successful in the fact that I was getting a little choked up by the end of Tell the Wind and Fire, that my heart was beating a little faster than it should have been, and I realized, oh crap, I mean, I know how this is going to end, but I'm not really sure if no. Dang it, no. a wonderful fact to reflect upon, that every human creature is constituted to be that profound secret and mystery to every other. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. At the beginning of this review, I said that while I thought this was a very strong adaptation, it also at the same time fell a little flat. And unfortunately, where I think it fell a little flat was with its characters. Our protagonist, Lucy, had way too many contradictions for my liking. I think it's pretty clear that Brennan wants to modernize Dickens' heroine and makes this Lucy far more, outspokenly righteous than the Lucy from Dickens, so that in Brennan's tale, whenever Lucy feels that the rights of herself or someone else are being violated, she immediately just opens her mouth and says something. Unfortunately, she only does that when the person she's talking to isn't really in any position of power. In a way, she's just kind of blowing hot air. Because whenever someone with genuine political power is in the room, she doesn't say anything, and she doesn't do anything. And I found that particularly frustrating. I said, you know what, how about you actually put your money where your mouth is? And the fact that she didn't was just all the more frustrating and made me as frustrated with her as I was with Dickens' original Lucy. The other thing that I found really contradictory about her character is that we're given all these flashbacks into Lucy's life, and through these rather lengthy flashbacks, you'd think that someone who has experienced firsthand so much of the injustice of the world that she lives in would not be nearly as naive as Lucy is within the narrative. She's so naive it doesn't make sense within her own past. I wonder if Brennan was sort of conflating innocence and naivete together, and therefore you ended up with a heroine who at times was just straight up stupid. And I couldn't reconcile that with Lucy's past, where she's clearly, like, she should have some street smarts. She should understand how the world works and, like, when people are doing things that are really obviously ploys. It was kind of baffling. Compounding upon that is the fact that Lucy is our narrator. This is a first-person POV story. And so we see the two men in her life through her eyes. And I think that's a little bit to their detriment. Her primary love interest is a boy named Ethan, and you are told many, many times by Lucy herself how much she loves Ethan. At times it's actually a little too much and can border on nauseating, because it's like, yes, I get it, you're in love with this boy, you don't need to bring it up every 2 seconds. The best way I can describe Ethan, vanilla. He's almost blandly perfect. And I wanted to like him for seeming like basically the only decent human being around in this world. I couldn't help but just find him a little dull. I mean, yeah, okay, he's just a good guy, and that's it. There's not much else to him, and he's also noticeably absent for a good portion of the book. And spoilers, the entire back third of the book depends upon me liking Ethan because we have to literally save his neck. End of spoiler. So the problem is that if I don't care about Ethan, the entire back third of the novel is therefore sort of negated. Rounding out our trilogy of characters and the other male in Lucy's life is Carwyn, who is Ethan's literal doppelganger. The doppelgangers are the best part of this book. The cool thing about the doppelgangers in Brennan's world, which are part of her magic system that she has created, is what they do in relation to the original Dickens narrative. In Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, the two men are called Carton and Darnay, and they had this eerie similar appearance. But they weren't related, they weren't twins, there wasn't anything like that. So what Brennan has created doppelgangers. So this explains away that eerie physical similarity between her version of Carton and Darnay. It also helps, again, to explain the magic system of her world. So Carwyn is Ethan's dark shadow. As is frequently brought up by Lucy, Carwyn wears Ethan's face, but he doesn't have a soul of his own because he was created through dark magic. Like Dickens' Sidney Carton, Carwyn is the most interesting of the three main characters. Go figure, he's the anti-hero bad boy. Of course he's the most interesting. Unfortunately, again, as before, we're only getting him through Lucy's perspective. Therefore, readers are forced to either write him off as completely evil and devoid of soul for half the book, because that's pretty much what Lucy seems to believe, despite she frequently says otherwise. What you think and what you say is not always the same thing. Because despite the fact that Lucy frequently says, oh, I don't believe this, they don't have a soul nonsense, she frequently thinks that he probably doesn't have a soul, and she treats him that way. So you're stuck either believing that, or you entirely reject Lucy's vision and start constructing one of your own based off of your own tastes and what you know of Dickens. That's not necessarily a good thing, because that does mean the reader is doing some of the work that the author should be doing. Again, as much as I love Dickens and I love making parallels in stories, when I'm actively aware that I'm doing it and I have to inject stuff into a character, I find that a little frustrating, and that's something I will harp on. Speaking of the original Dickensian character, I wish we'd been able to see more of Sidney Carton's penchant for self-destruction when it comes to Carwin, just to better cement that resemblance between his character, as well as adding another dimension to Carwin. Carwin is interesting. He's very snarky, he's fun to read, but I would have liked to seen some of that penchant for self-destruction, because that was kind of the tragic flaw of Sidney Carton. I wish you to know that you have been the last dream of my soul. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. So despite all of these gripes, I really did enjoy the book's concept. Adding magic and actual doppelgangers to a retelling of A Tale of Two Cities was fantastic, and the back third of the novel, especially the finale, is the highlight of the entire book. Like I said, I was emotionally gripped by the last chapter, almost in spite of all of my issues and criticisms of these characters, because Brennan fully committed to her premise and to her world. It is clunky and uneven, but she's still in it 110%, and it shows in all of the best ways because of it. And as a result, it's why I rate this at a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I can't help but admire the commitment and think that because she commits, she's able to rise just a little above all of the issues that I found in the novel. I can't help but recommend picking up this book, even if, like me, you roll your eyes a bit during a lot of the narrative, because the strength of the retelling's creativity outshines and outweighs its flaws. I will say that I don't think enjoyment of this novel depends upon one knowing and enjoying A Tale of Two Cities, but I do think that it helps, because you're going to catch every single reference and every single parallel. And if you don't catch those parallels, that's fine. Maybe you'll just enjoy the story. Who knows? But that's it from me today, you guys, and so until next time, cheers.